Cancel culture has recently emerged as a tactic used to strip controversial figures of the right to speak. College campuses and businesses across America are being purged of pro-lifers, supporters of Israel, questioners of the LGBT alliance, and any other right-wing or even centrist thinkers. Do I ally myself with all of these beliefs or consider myself politically conservative? No. But this growing orthodoxy concerns me, and I'm curious to its roots. As it turns out, and as we're going to discuss today, many of the underlying aspects of this ideology are reminiscent of Christian psychology. The consequences of our cultural climate being permeated by conversations of oppressor-victim narratives are twofold. First, anything that could be offensive is strictly off limits. We have begun to place compassion at the apex of our collective system of value, and though it is up to debate what exactly compassion dethroned, one should be sure in assuming that the reevaluation was of such a magnitude that our underlying axioms were disturbed, resulting in a new culture, a new set of rules, that is becoming increasingly distant from its roots. The worship of compassion is a rejection of life. Life is rife with uncertainties, many of which pertain to concerns of whether one is accepted into broader society. Not only does compassion make others feel completely socially validated without them having to do the work of bearing social responsibility, it also posits that emotional surety and avoidance of anything challenging are worthy goals. When a person or culture is unable to handle uncertainty, the fundamental truth of the world, which is that it is a place of tribulation, is rejected, and the ability to move forward in anything besides falsehood vanishes. What comes next, as outlined in Jordan Peterson's book Maps of Meaning, is either totalitarianism or nihilism. The next consequence is that those who espouse their potentially controversial beliefs will be associated with the oppressor group, the woke equivalent of Satan's army, and judged as deserving any punishment that may come their way. They will be accused by the cancel culture crowd of advancing a domineering narrative which can only be explained through the postmodern lens as a vessel for transporting oppression and procuring power. Now, postmodernism is a 20th century school of philosophy, whose foremost claim is that there are no grounding narratives to reality, no objective truths, and all narratives and truths are only methods of groups to exert power over other groups. Under this lens, the Western Christian Enlightenment civilization is seen as the evil tyranny which forced the world into their system of thought, and the inequality therein can only be escaped if all remnants of that system are dismantled. In the 80s and 90s, academics toiled with the ideas generated by such a system of thought and disseminated them in the form of a mind virus into the college students of Western culture, who would later go on to be the upper class of said culture. Finally, we arrive at today where these ideas have infected the broader society in forms such as equitable math, a teaching style found in the public education system that sees mathematical narratives as relative, and our current math system is permeated with various sins such as white supremacy.
Quickly, so I misunderstand. Are we saying that 2 plus 2, if you say it's 4, that's racist? I mean, that sounds like we may be mischaracterizing it. What, if you can quickly sum it up?
No, that's not mischaracterizing it at all. Math is basically racist under this ideology because it says there is no such thing as an objective reality. So 4 might not be the right number. 2 plus 2 might actually equal 5.
Postmodern philosophy emerged in the decades following World War II, the largest ideological conflict ever actually fought. Imagine this. For millions of years, reality could be accurately understood with only the information that one person could access with their immediate senses. European cultures embedded this view of the world within the Christian religion, which persisted for another few millennia. As scientific discoveries destroyed the geocentric model of the solar system, yielded no evidence for creationism, and utilized an objective worldview to solve problems in medicine and answer technological questions, the way human beings thought about the world changed drastically. Today we take it for granted that we know the earth is round, and we take it for granted that we are educated in the germ theory of disease. We no longer believe illness is a symptom of possession or some sort of other spiritual incident. Add on the effects of colonialism and empire, which throughout history has had the effect of infecting original culture and destabilizing the web of shared suppositions with strange ideas, religions, philosophies, and systems of thought. When key pieces of the network drop, a domino effect is inevitable. This is what Nietzsche meant by, God is dead and we have killed him. The Christian narrative was no longer tenable because it did not account for all of these novel ways of looking at the world, and the belief system largely collapsed. The Germans protected themselves from the awful truth by spinning their resentment over the economic situation and loss in World War II on Jews in democratic countries. The Soviets organized under a new religion of Marxist-Leninism, The original postmodernists were aware of this collapse and became nihilistic, believing that there could be no all-encompassing system for understanding the world, which is of course true, except for the fact that one must accept an incomplete way of understanding the world and constantly update it lest they become prey for instinctual vices. The foremost drive among these thinkers was resentment towards the purveyors of Western ideas for the crime of not having a system of beliefs so complete that everyone lived in utopia. The difference between the response of authoritarian countries and of postmodernists is that the former opted towards a totalitarian mindset, while the latter became nihilistic. Totalitarians are anxious, quick to react, and would have responded much faster than the nihilists who had no reason to react to the shocking news of axiomatic destabilization. I believe now we are at the precipice of a cultural revolution by the hands of these nihilists on a scale that hasn't been matched, probably, in history. Their successors and the pushers of said revolution, the woke crowd, debases Christianity for its absurd beliefs. But psychoanalytic thought has a very interesting perspective when it comes to psychic energy. Emotions, impulses, morality, drives, and systems of belief are all forms of psychic energy, which cannot merely disappear from an individual when the cultural climate changes or those beliefs get proven false. If it were this way, therapy would be as simple as the calculator app on your phone, because we could readily dispense of our absurd convictions and their associated energies. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to bring this energy into consciousness where it can be redirected. I also don't mean to make the case that Christianity is either true nor false, just that it's absurd when viewed from our shallow materialistic perspective that we so often find ourselves in. Another interesting, if not disturbing, realization of the psychoanalysts is that individuals share a collective mind with the cultures that they inhabit. Everyone that adheres to a culture adheres to the same set of rules, beliefs, morals, truths, and therefore are all subject to the same psychic forces. When a large event like the death of God happens and everyone begins to withdraw from Christian ideals, such ideals go under the surface and find new outlets on mass scale. Some of those ideals include a world of paradise beyond death, a redeeming figure for humanity in the form of Christ, and an individual's ability to atone for one's sins because of Christ's voluntary crucifixion. I argue that these collective ideas did not die along with Christianity, in the sense that Christianity is no longer an explicit value for most people or world leaders, but instead were augmented in the postmodern movement to fit a new secular narrative. In the 19th century, philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who prophesied the death of God, criticized Christianity for many reasons, one of those being the concept of heaven or the afterlife. Nietzsche believed that living for an expectation of divine reward and paradise after one's time on earth was essentially life-denying. He makes a very strong argument. First, it is not clear that moral actions carried out in hopes of heavenly reward makes the person moral at all. In fact, it probably makes them selfish. Second, it's a form of escapism from one's problems. Instead of facing the challenges of life forthrightly, a fervent believer in heaven may wait for some external force to make things right in the afterlife. But may I make the bold suggestion that Nietzsche didn't foresee the patterns of life denial being born again in the utopian attempts to create paradise on earth? The Bolsheviks believed that spiritual well-being could be reached only if material resources were redistributed. China, Korea, Cambodia, Cuba, and countless other countries followed suit. Western intellectuals felt the same ideas and contaminated modern thought with it. Today we are bombarded by ideas of a green utopia, the alternative being climate catastrophe. We also have this notion of a utopia of identity, where anyone can choose to be anything they wish. Each person would be able to outwardly manifest who they feel to be on the inside, whatever that means. But the road to get there requires an elimination of intolerant oppressors who hold old-fashioned notions such as there are only two genders. This belief ultimately stems from the widespread desire not to feel enslaved by uncontrollable circumstances, which comes with a plethora of crushing responsibilities and limitations. The concept of paradise is a consistency between the old and new mass religion, but the deviation is that the average Christian tended to focus on their own actions, even if they could be self-centered, for admission to heaven, whereas the terrestrial heaven implies that everyone must cooperate, even if compelled to. Paradise is coupled with the eradication of suffering, and while the Christians can tolerate a lifelong of suffering with the belief of it disappearing after death, the modern utopians have no such temporal protection from wanting everything to be made right and just as soon as possible. Without a long foray into the psychology of suffering, suffice it to say that the Buddhists were right to call it inevitable, and into the impossibility of complete satisfaction in the human condition, we will leave it at that. The next transformed Christian value is that of Christ's redeeming sacrifice, on which the Christian tradition of personal atonement and redemption rests. In their most respectable iteration, Christians believe that no sin runs so deep that a person's soul is not salvageable. Before becoming a disciple, Matthew exhorted people as a tax collector. Peter, another disciple, denied Christ during his arrest and made a glorious comeback. St. Augustine and St. Francis of Catholicism both were rebellious, promiscuous youths before their conversions. Though Christians are often portrayed with some degree of accuracy as prudish and judgmental, the Christ-like qualities that they strive towards, at least in theory, include forgiveness, such as that the Father above exercises. However, modern people do not believe in this redeeming figure, which was axiomatic to prior iterations of our culture, and one would be wise to ask, what else did we lose when we got rid of that? Perhaps we also got rid of the concept of atonement and forgiveness. This is embodied most precisely in cancel culture, which can be summarized as a legion of social justice moralizers using the sweeping power of the internet to permanently assassinate the life and career of anyone who steps beyond the narrow line of their PC set of ethics. This has gone so far that anyone who says anything of substance will have an attempt of cancellation launched upon them at some point. Peter Boghossian, a philosopher and former professor at Portland State University, received hate and slander online for speaking out against wokeness and having speakers in his classes who did not fit the prevailing orthodoxy. Eventually, the vigilantes worked themselves into an irrational frenzy such that they fabricated claims of Boghossian beating his wife and children, eventually found to be utterly false. The university climate is especially concerning. Students are being indoctrinated into this new secular religion and taught that the schools should be safe places, in other words, Edenic gardens. Not safe in the reasonable sense of not having to worry about physical violence and terrorism, but quite the opposite. They believe they have to be safe from speakers and educational content that may be challenging to their beliefs, or, even more rationally, challenging to their feelings. Any dissenter is to be regarded as a serpent that jeopardizes not only the individual but the whole belief system, which is sacred and must be defended at all costs. Because they so intensely fear speech, they feel absolutely justified in responding by physical violence. Look at the situation at Evergreen State College in 2017 when Bret Weinstein spoke out against the racist day of absence, or the riots at Berkeley the same year when the Trump-supporting Milo Yiannopoulos was invited to speak on campus. Just this year, a Jewish professor at San Jose University named Jeffrey Blutinger gave a presentation on peace in the Middle East for the most recent Israel-Palestine conflict. According to the Fire.org's deplatforming database, students called for Blutinger's talk to be cancelled. The event was not cancelled, but it was relocated from its original location. On the day of the event, student protesters blocked entrances and chanted that Zionists are not welcome on campus. About 20 minutes into Blutinger's speech, shoving started between protesters and police in the hallway outside of the room where he was speaking, and Blutinger was escorted off campus by police for his safety. Even dead thinkers and national leaders are not exempt, for they are wiped from the slate of history if what they said or wrote is unable to be censored to fit the PC orthodoxy. The founding fathers of the United States had their flaws from the perspective of contemporary standards, but removing their statues erases a culture's knowledge of why those statues were erected in the first place. That is, as a reminder of their immense contribution to a social democratic political system that advanced equality of human beings further than any nations prior. Without the concept of God, whose job it is to balance the cosmic scales, the activists take it into their own hands not only to be judge, but also to administer punishment. They do not believe the justice system can be used in such a manner, so they enact an ethical self-determinism. They seek to uphold a universal set of ethics to which they can't ascribe an author or source. What this means is that their sense of morality comes from the unconscious, the unexplored, and what has not been explored can only be understood emotionally. That means the foundations of these ethics are essentially emotional and narcissistic, only masquerading as truths that have been logically arrived at through connection with our higher nature. Old ideas within the collective unconscious, the shared ideas that form the substructure of our culture yet are seldom understood, get reused with alterations that reflect the advances in society. What we are led to believe is that this morality is a revolution, something entirely new and devoid of Christian sentiment, but that is not the case. It is a sort of inversion of equal and opposite magnitude, where a horrible process of balancing the collective mind will follow. If any of you wish to understand more about what I mean by inversion and balancing, I recommend you look into Carl Jung's book Ion, where he analyzes the psychology of Western culture. With that, I will close. But many of the ideas I discussed here are still turning around in my head like a load of clothes in the dryer that refuse to get rid of water. For example, what is the solution to the ideological war which is so passionately dividing the people of the West? Are we to revert to Christianity, like our forefathers? Are we to accept the nihilistic meaninglessness resulting from rejecting a unifying narrative for humanity? Are we to become Nietzschean Übermensches? I hope to continue exploring these ideas in video format, and I hope that some people will find them interesting. If there are flaws in my thinking, please leave a comment below, and I will catch you next time.